Hey guys, welcome to another podcast. I'm excited about today. I think we're going to have a good time. We've already had some good laughs. It's going to be a good day. Yeah, for sure. So what we've been trying to do with this sermon series is just talk through the sermon from the previous week. And this past week, we talked about faith, talked about Abraham, talked about what it meant for him to leave go to Haran, come on down to Canaan, and then the steps that he took. So I thought we could jump into that. So faith is a big topic, massive topic, and it's also the Abrahamic covenant, which is another massive topic. So we shouldn't have any shortage of things to talk about today. But I think for starters, what sticks out to you about the faith of Abraham as you reflect even on last Sunday or just some of the things you've known about Abraham? When you think of that, what sticks out to you?
Hebrews says that without faith it's impossible to please God. Okay, so God is pleased with our faith. Abraham was called the friend of God. It's mentioned several times in the Old and New Testament. He was a friend of God. I mean, these guys had something going on. And obviously it has something to do with Abraham's faith, willing to trust God and do stuff that ordinarily people would not do.
Yeah.
That sticks out to me.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Here, Jeff opening his Bible. I'm ready for something good over here.
Just looking for Genesis.
Towards the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Honestly, I just feel like there's a lot that I can say, but I just immediately think about. I go to both Genesis 22, but then you fast forward to Hebrews and you think about what was in Abraham's heart, even in that moment, right, where he was called to go sacrifice Isaac, and I know that it's like we all know this story, but I just love that we don't actually get to see what motivated Abraham until we get way later down the road into Hebrews, where it was like this is what was credited. He believed that God would resurrect someone from the dead. So when he held up that sacrificial knife, he wasn't waiting for angelic intervention. Do you know what I'm saying? Yep. He wasn't. That's why it's like, stop. It's clear that you fear the Lord your God, that you wouldn't withhold your only son Isaac, And so I just love that the moment he got asked to go do that, it says he got up early and he went. And so quick obedience, worship was in his heart, and it was already done. But we don't actually get to read that until way later. That's what was in his heart. Yep. That he was carrying. That's why he says the Lord will provide for himself the lamb. And we get all of that. But I just think that motivates me a lot when I think about him and the faith that we get to carry that. Sometimes we hear stories like that and we think we can just wait for intervention. But ultimately God's really testing the heart, and that's what he sees. And that's what he responds to. And so he believed that if he did that in that moment, Isaac was getting back up. And that was a foreshadow of, obviously, Jesus and the Father. And so that's what I think about. It's amazing.
Yeah. One of the great points of the sermon was Abraham trusted that God could raise the dead. And his faith, to what you were talking about, Jordan, is his faith extended that far, clear to Isaac. And we, in our Connect groups, have had an interesting discussion on a couple of these things. So one of the questions we pondered is, what miraculous thing are you trusting God for in advance? And it just made us think through, and there's certainly some specific things in people's lives and some practical things, but I know one of the things we talked about is we're trusting God that he has transformed us, he's redeemed us, and that he is good on his word, and we get to live in that transformation and that new life. And so that's just one of the things that stuck out in our conversations.
Yeah.
I just actually don't know if you talked about this on Sunday, because the girl who's playing the piano, I had to take her. So I didn't hear what you talked about. But I just was thinking about Abraham, and I was thinking about when the Lord made him the promise that he'd be the father of many nations. And like to have that big of a promise where he's like, look up to the stars, like that's going to be pretty much your inheritance. And then, fast forward later on with both of his sons, they kind of seemed, I'm sure, to him at different points to be in disaster. Like the Lord tells him to sacrifice Isaac, and then Ishmael, and it's like, I'm sure like for him to question God in those moments, though he didn't, you know, was like, yeah, just how are you going to make me the father of many nations when my sons, you know, you're asking me to pretty much give you my sons, you know? So I don't know, just kind of processing, thinking about.
You know
God's
what's
promise.
in light of that, Sasha, you know what I thought about was this. See, Abraham believed God and did unbelievable things, like prepared to sacrifice his son, believing that God would raise him from the dead and all that. And the backdrop is that the first promise came, Abraham was 75 years of age. Mm-hmm. It wasn't fulfilled till he was 100. Mm-hmm. Last time I calculated that, that's 25 years. Mm-hmm. You know, and so, you know, how often do we wait 25 years before God fulfills his promise? I was counseling someone last night, and he was telling me how that God wasn't meeting his expectations, and he was angry with God. And when we broke it down, it was nothing. It was nothing, let alone waiting 25 years for the promise. But in the midst of all that, look, the 25 years, there were times when Abraham got distracted. Now, that's important because, you know, he's known as a friend of God. And God's pleased with him. But there were times when he would go to Egypt when God didn't say go to Egypt. There were times when Sarah comes up with a plan B. We end up with Ishmael. That was all Abraham. Mm-hmm. You know, and so, but God didn't give up on him in spite of the fact that at times he got distracted, which is encouraging to me because there are times I get distracted. But I want to be known as a friend of God. And so God is forgiving. He's patient. He's long-suffering. And if I'm continuing overall to head towards Jerusalem, so to speak, I'll be okay. But there are times when people can get distracted.
So you're saying that the faith of God actually shows the faith of Abraham actually shows the faithfulness of God.
Wow.
God continues to be, and one of the verses that you brought up, Troy, in your message was that Joshua 24:3, and we talked about that in our Connect groups as well. And it's interesting that Abraham went from a bunch of gods and no nation to one God and a bunch of nations. Mm-hmm. All come from him. Wow. And so, but it's because God was faithful. Mm-hmm. And a couple of things it said in that verse, it says that Joshua is telling all the people how they've come from this polytheistic society. And it says, but I took your ancestors. Well, basically, he said a couple of things. God says, I took, I led, and I gave. This all comes. He's telling Abraham, "Hey, this is what I've done," and it's so cool how Abraham does walk in obedience. But man, it just reflects back to the faithfulness of God, and has impressed us.
Man, I should tweet all of that. That was good stuff, man. That's really good. I didn't even introduce us. I didn't do a very good job in the very beginning. So welcome everybody, Pastor Don, Pastor Jeff, Jordan, and Sasha,
Woo.
And Little Marcotte. Little Marcotte, right? So exciting. Yeah. Faith.
Yeah, that's right.
Faith right there. That's the story. Oh, man, I love that. And I love the points you guys have brought up. But one of the things for me, just kind of going through this and studying through it, was the fact that Abraham was quite old in age when God called him. And there's a really good chance he was polytheistic, as Jeff said. He's serving other gods. He's living life in the culture of Babylon. And then, boom, God speaks and transforms everything about him late in life. Yeah. And it's such a big deal that he leaves with his dad, his nephew Lot, who, by the way, Lot's dad, Abram's brother, died in Ur. Yeah. And that's why I think Lot was hanging out with him, because he just right there went with him. But it's just amazing to me that they would leave everything based on the fact that God said, just go do this and trust me. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, 25 years it takes to have the first baby of a nation. Mm-hmm. And man, sometimes for me, it's like, if I'm waiting on God for 2 weeks, I feel like he's rejected me, and he doesn't know, like, he forgot about Troy, because I didn't get my answer.
Sure.
Yeah.
But see, and that's that's one thing. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about this. I don't really know, but it makes me think about, like, I feel like Isaac gets overlooked a lot in this story because I think if the foreshadowing is looking at Jesus and the Father, knowing that Jesus submitted himself, where he goes, if there's any other way, but nevertheless, your will be done. So to think about Isaac, people argue that he was later in life. Maybe, I personally think he was like older. Either way, in that moment where, like, clearly he probably could have overthrown, like, so can you imagine sitting there and trusting his father? It's not like God told Isaac that, you know what I'm saying? So to be bound hand and foot and then to have this knife held over you. Do you know the level of trust that you have to have?
That's incomprehensible.
That's
Because
unbelievable.
I think he was like a young teenager.
Unbelievable.
It's
And
believed he
Abraham
was.
would have been like 113
Sure.
years old.
Sure.
He could have overpowered him.
Sure. Yeah, because I mean, whatever. It's not worth the argue. Some people think, oh no, he was like probably 30s. He's
No,
13.
we should argue. Let's
Either
argue.
way, let's do it.
I'm in a mood, man.
No, he's 13. No, he's 33. No, whatever. I'm just saying that no matter what, I mean, little 13-year-old kid starts running away, kicking and
Right.
screaming. Like, I don't think when he asked, where's the sacrifice, I don't think he's trying to create a stumbling block. I think he's asking a very legit question.
For sure.
And then he carried on.
Yeah.
At least what we've read.
Yeah.
So sometimes in thinking about trust and what it means to endure or wait, you know what I'm saying? Like, that boggles me a little bit sometimes thinking about him. So anyways,
It's good.
suffering, longevity, can we just trust? Even if we might not even know the full promise. It's just like, wow. So that's huge, man.
And to take us back to just what we talked about Sunday, I mean, he had to trust so that he would detach from everything else. And I think one of our issues in life sometimes is we are super attached to the culture and everything that's going on around us and the American dream, whatever that means to everybody. And we don't trust God enough in his promises to detach from that. Yeah. So he had to detach, he had to trust, and he had to take these steps of faith, which were pretty massive, all the way to the pinnacle of faith when it was like, put your son on the altar, which you can't even think about it. Cannot even fathom entertaining that thought.
Right.
Seriously.
Right.
So, unbelievable.
Yeah, that detachment you had touched on it a few minutes ago, but God calls him out of this land, and there's a period of time, and so Abraham may have just been thinking, why is God doing this? And yet God's purpose is in detaching him from certain things, but we don't see that when we're just like, oh, woe is me. Why is God doing this? But God has a plan, and he's like, no, I'm detaching you for a purpose, for a reason, to make it clear and to give me glory. And so to your counseling appointment, we're just so short-sighted, aren't we? And that's me included. It's like, why is God doing this? It's like, well, hang on, have faith and wait and see what God's doing and what God's detaching me from and what God's providing for me.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Well,
It's very good stuff.
Yeah. Closing thoughts, closing arguments.
Paul says he staggered not at the promise of God, but he gave glory to God. And here again, going back to another point that was mentioned earlier, is that Abraham did get distracted at times. But God and his his mercy endures forever. He was faithful. God doesn't get distracted, but we do. But he's merciful. And he's long-suffering, another word for patient himself with us. It's this interesting concept is in the book of John, chapter 2. It talks about that there were many people that were following Jesus at the beginning of his ministry, but the writer says, but he did not put his trust in them because he knew the heart of man. So we have this throng there and followers. But Jesus didn't get excited because he knew people's hearts. Now, my point is that to a large degree, it depends on God. I mean, he gives us faith. We got to operate it. He gives us grace. He gives us even a desire. It's God that works within you, Philippians says, to will and to do of his own good pleasure. It all comes from him. So what I need to do is to, rather than go home and exercise to get stronger, I need to continue to put my hand in his hand and let him lead me, because it all comes from him. Yeah.
That's good close right there.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, this next Sunday, Gabor Grace is going to be teaching on truth. Finishing out our series.
Cool.
Hey, we've been going through these deep conversations, and hopefully we're being able to have conversations like this with other Christians and also some other people who might be seeking out faith in Jesus. And so we'll finish this series up this Sunday, and really looking forward to hearing from what he has this week. And thanks for joining in today.
Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have everyone.
Love it.
Yeah.